Most men don't lose their peace all at once. They lose it slowly, by staying too long with the wrong woman. At first, nothing feels dangerous. There's no chaos, no obvious red flags, no dramatic blow-ups. And that's exactly why it costs so many men years of their life. Low-value women rarely reveal themselves through noise. They reveal themselves through patterns you don't notice until you're already invested. In this video, I'm breaking down 7 hidden signs of a low-value woman, not to judge her, but to protect you. Because the real damage isn't heartbreak. It's losing your standards, your discipline, and your future without realizing how it happened. And listen carefully. Sign number 7 is the one almost every man misses, the sign that quietly trains you to accept less, stay loyal without commitment, and call it patience. If you value peace, structure, and clarity, you need to hear this. Before we talk about signs, it's important to understand why so many men overlook them in the first place. It's not because they lack intelligence or awareness. It's because they've been conditioned to prioritize harmony over clarity and patience over evaluation. This video isn't asking you to become colder or more suspicious. It's asking you to become more precise about what you allow into your life. If that kind of clarity matters to you, take a second to like this video and subscribe. Now, to understand how these patterns begin, we have to start with the first place men lose ground in relationships, the moment responsibility is shifted away from her and quietly placed onto you. Number 1. She never takes responsibility. Pay attention to how she tells her past. Every ex was toxic. Every job failed because the boss was unfair. Every fallout was someone else's fault. The story never changes, only the characters do. At first, it sounds like bad luck. Over time, it reveals something colder, a refusal to own her choices. When a woman cannot take responsibility, she cannot mature. Growth requires friction, reflection, and the ability to say, I played a part in this. Without that skill, she stays emotionally frozen. Not because she lacks intelligence, but because accountability threatens her self-image. Blame feels safer than growth. This is where good men get pulled under. You start listening, empathizing, and slowly adjusting yourself to avoid becoming the next villain in her story. You apologize to keep the peace. You explain yourself to prevent another misunderstanding. Before you realize it, you're managing outcomes you didn't create. You're carrying guilt that isn't yours. This pattern quietly reshapes you. You become cautious with your words, hesitant with your needs, and apologetic for having boundaries. You start negotiating your standards instead of enforcing them. Over time, your confidence bends, not because you are weak, but because you're trying to love someone who refuses to stand accountable. That imbalance doesn't heal. It deepens. The danger isn't one argument. It's the pattern. A woman who never owns her past will rewrite the present to protect herself. When something breaks, you become the explanation. When she feels uncomfortable, you become the cause. And the more you absorb that pressure, the more your standards erode. Contrast that with a woman of value. She pauses. She reflects. She learns. She doesn't need to be perfect, but she is honest. She understands that responsibility isn't punishment. It's power. It gives her control over her future. Here is the truth most men miss. A woman who can't own her past will eventually blame you for her future. If she refuses accountability today, she's rehearsing how she'll treat you tomorrow. And if you ignore this sign early, you'll spend years paying interest on a debt you never owed. Number 2. Her identity is built on attention, not character. This one is dangerous because it looks harmless. Sometimes it even looks attractive. She's confident, stylish, socially visible. People notice her, men admire her, and many mistake that glow for depth. But attention is not self-worth. It's a substitute for it. Watch what fuels her: likes, comments, being seen, being desired. Her phone isn't just a tool, it's a mirror. Every notification reassures her that she still exists, that she still matters. The problem isn't beauty or confidence. The problem is dependency. When attention becomes the source of identity, character stops developing. A woman like this invests heavily in how she's perceived, but very little in who she is when no one is watching. She curates, performs, and protects an image. And when an image becomes the priority, truth becomes optional. Growth becomes inconvenient. Anything that threatens how she looks to others feels like an attack. This is where men get trapped. You see presentation and assume stability. You see confidence and assume strength. You confuse visibility with value. But attention doesn't build relationships. It builds audiences. And a woman who lives for an audience will always need one, even when she's with you. Ask yourself how she reacts when attention fades. Does she become restless? Irritable? Does she seek validation elsewhere instead of grounding herself? That's the tell. Because when self-worth comes from the outside, it never lasts. It has to be renewed constantly, often at the cost of intimacy and trust. Here's the deeper risk. A woman addicted to attention doesn't want to be known. She wants to be admired. And admiration is shallow. It doesn't require accountability. It doesn't demand consistency. It simply reflects back what she wants to see. This is why so many men feel unseen in these relationships. You're present, loyal, and invested, yet somehow you're competing with strangers for her focus. Not because you're lacking, but because no one person can satisfy a hunger that was never meant to be fed externally. Remember this clearly. Admiration is rented. Character is owned. A woman with character can sit in silence without needing applause. A woman without it will always chase the next hit of validation. So ask the question most men avoid. Does she want to be loved, or does she want to be admired? Because those two paths lead to very different futures. Number 3. She argues to win, not to understand. At first, it feels like passion, strong opinions, emotional intensity. She talks fast, reacts faster, and always has something to say. But over time, you notice a pattern. Conversations don't move forward. They escalate. What should be dialogue turns into tension. What should be understanding turns into exhaustion. Watch how she argues. She interrupts before you finish a sentence. She corrects your wording instead of addressing your point. She reacts to how something sounds, not what it means. Facts don't calm her. Clarity doesn't help. Because the argument was never about truth. It was about control. For her, losing an argument feels like losing power. Silence feels dangerous. Reflection feels like weakness. So she fills every gap with noise. She doesn't pause to understand because understanding would require humility. And humility would mean admitting she might be wrong. This is where many good men make a costly mistake. You think if you explain yourself better, she'll finally hear you. You slow your voice. You choose your words carefully. You try to be fair, logical, calm. But logic doesn't disarm someone who sees conversation as a battlefield. The more you explain, the more ground you give up. Here's the truth most men learn too late. You can't reason your way into peace with someone who sees understanding as surrender. Every time you engage on her terms, you lose twice. First, your energy. Then, your respect. You leave the conversation drained, confused, and somehow responsible for a conflict you didn't start. Over time, this dynamic reshapes you. You avoid topics to keep things calm. You withhold thoughts to prevent blow-ups. You trade honesty for quiet. And that silence doesn't bring peace. It brings resentment. A woman of value doesn't need to dominate a conversation to feel secure. She can listen without preparing a counterattack. She can sit in silence without feeling threatened. She understands that calm is strength, not submission. When a woman fears silence, it's because silence exposes the weakness of her position. So she creates conflict to feel in control. If you stay long enough, That conflict becomes the atmosphere you live in. And no man can build a strong life in an environment that treats communication like combat. Number 4, she never learns, she just repeats cycles. This is where hope quietly turns into self-deception. You hear her talk about healing, about growth, about how she's working on herself. The words sound right, the intentions seem genuine. But when you look closer, nothing actually changes. Different faces, same story. Different beginning, identical ending. Same type of men, same conflicts, same emotional explosions, same heartbreak. The excuses evolve, but the outcomes don't. And that's not bad luck. That's a pattern. Real growth requires reflection. It demands that someone sit with discomfort long enough to ask, what part did I play in this? But she doesn't pause. She restarts. She jumps from one situation to the next because movement feels like progress, even when it's just avoidance. Calling it healing makes it sound productive. In reality, it's escape with better branding. This is the moment many men get trapped. You see potential. You think timing was the problem. You believe that with stability, patience, and enough support, she'll finally break the cycle. You tell yourself you're different, that you'll be the one who changes the ending. But here's the truth. You can't be someone's breakthrough if they refuse to face themselves. Growth doesn't happen because someone else is patient. It happens because pain finally becomes louder than denial. Until that moment arrives, she will keep choosing familiarity over improvement, comfort over accountability. Over time, you start carrying the emotional weight of her past. You brace for reactions that don't belong to you. You manage moods you didn't create. You feel punished for mistakes someone else made years before you arrived. And slowly, her unresolved history becomes the atmosphere of your relationship. A woman of value doesn't repeat lessons indefinitely. She might stumble once, maybe twice. But then she stops. She reflects. She changes her behavior, not her vocabulary. Behavior. When someone shows you the same pattern in different packaging, believe the pattern. Because cycles don't break themselves. They end only when someone takes responsibility for the role they play in creating them. Here is the line you need to remember. You can't fix what refuses to face itself. And the longer you stay hoping she'll learn, the more likely it is that her cycle becomes yours. Number 5. She has desires, but no direction. Ask her where she sees herself in 5 years and listen carefully. Not to the tone, but to the substance. You'll often hear something soft and vague. I just want to be happy. It sounds harmless, even sincere. But happiness is not a plan. It's a feeling. And feelings don't build futures. A woman like this wants the outcome without committing to the process. She dreams about a beautiful life, but resists the structure required to create one. She talks about love, but avoids consistency. She wants success, but rejects routine. Her desires live in her imagination, not her calendar. This is where the gap between you becomes dangerous. While you're thinking in years, she's thinking in moods. While you're building, she's reacting. You sacrifice comfort today to secure tomorrow. She chases moments that feel good right now and calls it freedom. Over time, those two timelines collide. At first, you try to help. You offer guidance, stability, structure. You become the planner, the anchor, the one holding things together. And without realizing it, you stop being her partner and start becoming her support system. You carry the weight she refuses to pick up. This is the long-term cost most men don't calculate. You begin building a future for two while she's still living one day at a time. You manage responsibilities she avoids. You compensate for discipline she hasn't developed. And the more you do, the more dependent she becomes, not stronger. Here's the hard truth. You're not inspiring her. You're enabling her. And eventually, she'll resent you for the very stability you provide. Not because you did something wrong, but because direction exposes her lack of it. What once felt like support starts feeling like pressure to her. A woman of value understands that structure isn't a cage, it's a foundation. She knows discipline is a form of self-respect. She builds habits before chasing happiness, because she understands that peace is earned, not wished into existence. Remember this clearly. You're not her partner when you're carrying her life. You're her life support system. And you cannot build a future with someone who refuses to build herself. If she has desires without direction, your time will become the price she pays for avoiding responsibility. Number 6. Her environment keeps her weak. If you really want to understand a woman, don't focus only on her words. Look at the people she surrounds herself with. Her circle will tell you everything she won't. Values are contagious. Standards are reinforced socially. And no one evolves in an environment that rewards stagnation. Many men make the mistake of isolating the woman from her world, as if she exists independently of it. She doesn't. You're not just dating her. You're stepping into an ecosystem, and if that ecosystem thrives on gossip, drama, and constant victimhood, it will eventually pull her back no matter how strong you are. Pay attention to what her friends normalize. Do they take responsibility? Or do they blame everyone else? Do they talk about growth? Or do they bond over complaints? Are weekends about building something meaningful or escaping reality? An environment that avoids accountability will always resist change. This is where subtle sabotage happens. When she starts to grow, her circle feels threatened. When she seeks stability, they call it boring. When she meets a grounded man, they frame him as controlling. Not because he is, but because his standards expose their comfort zones. And instead of questioning themselves, they question him. A woman of value understands this dynamic. She knows that growth sometimes requires distance. She's willing to step away from familiar spaces to become someone better. She chooses mentors over cheerleaders. She allows her environment to challenge her, not coddle her. A woman without value fears loneliness more than stagnation. She stays where she's validated, not where she's improved. And over time, she begins to see you through the lens of people who don't understand your discipline, your goals, or your boundaries. Here's the reality men need to accept. If she listens to women who are stuck, she will slowly adopt their mindset. And once that happens, every standard you hold will feel like an attack to her. Not because it's wrong, but because it doesn't fit the world she refuses to leave. Remember this line clearly. Who she listens to determines how she treats you. And if her environment keeps her weak, your strength will always feel like a threat. Number 7. Commitment is optional for her, but loyalty is required from you. This is the sign most men miss, not because it's invisible, but because it's framed as modern, reasonable, even progressive. She says she doesn't want to rush things. She wants to see where it goes. She's not ready for labels yet. And if you're not careful, you'll mistake that ambiguity for honesty. Look closer at the behavior. She expects your time, your consistency, your emotional availability. She wants you to show up like a boyfriend, think like a boyfriend, sacrifice like a boyfriend. But when it comes to her obligations, everything stays undefined. She keeps her options open while quietly closing yours. This is not confusion, it's design. Ambiguity gives her protection. As long as nothing is clearly defined, she can't be held accountable. If she's distant, she's just focusing on herself. If she crosses boundaries, you're reading too much into it. If she pulls away, you were never officially anything. The lack of structure becomes her shield. And here's where the damage happens. To keep the connection, you start adjusting yourself. You lower expectations. You delay conversations you should be having. You give more effort to earn clarity that never arrives. Slowly, you train yourself to accept less in exchange for the illusion of closeness. This is how standards collapse quietly. Not through betrayal, but through tolerance. You tolerate inconsistency. You tolerate emotional imbalance. You tolerate a situation where loyalty flows one direction. And the longer it continues, the more normal it feels. At some point, you realize something painful. You've been loyal to someone who never chose you. You built your behavior around a relationship she refused to define. You protected something that didn't protect you back. And the cost wasn't just time. It was self-respect. A woman of value doesn't play games with commitment. If she wants you, she's clear. Her actions align with her words. She understands that commitment isn't a trap, it's a choice. And choices require responsibility. The woman without value wants the safety of your devotion with the freedom of singlehood. She wants access without obligation, and that combination is lethal for a man who leads with sincerity. Remember this clearly. Loyalty without commitment is self-betrayal. And if you stay in a dynamic where she keeps her options open while expecting you to close yours, you are not being patient. You are being slowly erased. Low-value women are not always easy to spot. Some look like potential, some look exciting, some even look like exactly what you've been waiting for. That's why so many men don't realize what's happening until they're already drained, distracted, and disconnected from the man they used to be. But patterns never lie. When responsibility is avoided, when attention replaces character, when conflict replaces communication, when cycles repeat, when desire has no direction, when the environment stays weak, and when commitment is demanded without being given back, the outcome is always the same. You lose time, you lose focus, and slowly, you lose yourself. The real cost isn't one argument or one disappointment. It's the erosion of discipline, the loss of clarity, the quiet shift from leading your life to managing someone else's instability. And that's how men wake up years later wondering how they ended up so far from their purpose. This isn't about blaming women. It's about choosing wisely. It's about understanding that attraction is easy, but alignment is rare. And alignment only happens when standards are enforced, not negotiated. You don't protect your future by hoping someone changes. You protect it by observing behavior, evaluating patterns, and walking away when the signs are clear. You don't need drama to leave. You need clarity. And clarity is strength. Here's what matters most. Your peace is not negotiable. Your time is not refundable. And your loyalty should never be given to someone who treats commitment like an option. If this message resonated, press like as a signal to yourself that standards matter. Drop one word in the comments that reflects where you are right now. And subscribe if you want to continue sharpening the mindset of a man who refuses to be led by confusion, pressure, or emotional imbalance. Stay aware, stay grounded, and never apologize for protecting your future.